Welcome everyone. Hello on the internet. It's Lord's Day Holy Reading. We're continuing with Thomas Manton, the Lord's Prayer, and here's Mr. Peck to continue on.
All right, welcome. Last week we started Lead Us Not Into Temptation, that section, and Mr. Manton covered how God tempts us in that first part. So today we're going to try to cover how Satan tempts us and how our own hearts tempt us. Secondly, there are temptations from Satan as well as from God, who is called the tempter, Matthew 4:3. Now the devil's temptations, they are evil and for evil. How doth the devil tempt? One, by propounding objects, as Luke 4:5, he showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. He had nothing to work upon within, therefore he propounds outward objects. So still the devil tempts us with a curious eye to take in the object, that it may be a bait and a snare to the soul. Achan takes notice of it himself, Joshua 7:21. When I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonish garment and a wedge of gold, then I coveted them and took them. I saw, I coveted, and I took. The eye awakens desire, and desire that inclines to practice. So Proverbs 23:31, look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. Unless we shut the windows of the soul, this plague gets in by the senses. The heart is corrupted by objects that we take in by the senses, as it corrupted Eve, dealt with her first by the sense. The forbidden fruit was full in her way, then the devil sets upon her. Point 2, under secondly, he tempts by the persuasion of instruments, who are the devil's spokesmen. Thus was Joseph tempted by the enticements and blandishments of his mistress. Genesis 39:7. And many times the devil sets nearest friends and relations to weaken their zeal and withdraw their hearts from God. Matthew 16:23. Saith Christ to Peter, get thee behind me, Satan. It was Peter said it, yet Christ rebuked Satan, for the devil had a hand in it. He makes one of Christ's disciples his instrument. Point 3, he doth it by internal suggestion. 1 Chronicles 21:1. And Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. That is by internal suggestion. John 13:2, the devil put it into the heart of Judas to betray him. He haunts and pesters the hearts of men by vain thoughts and carnal imaginations. So the God of this world, quote, is said to blind their minds. 2 Corinthians 4:4. 4, by stirring up the humors of our body, when he seeth men inclined to wrath and angry motions or lust, the devil joins and makes the tempest the more violent. He knows what use to make of an angry look, a wanton glance. He knows how to tempt by awakening the humors of our own body against us. So take some observations here. Point 1 under this. In all sins, Satan joineth. He is not idle, but makes use of every inclination of ours. As he sees the tree leaning, he joins issue. But some sins are purely of his suggestion, horrid sins and such as are so very evil that they could come from no other but from the devil. Such sins as could not be acted by man in an ordinary course of sinning, as Judas his treason. Though he were devil enough to plot such a thing, yet it is said Satan put it into his heart. And such singular diabolical suggestions may be darted into the bosom of believers. Thoughts of atheism, blasphemy, unnatural sins, self-murder, suspicion of the gospel, these things the devil throws in. Therefore, Ephesians 6:16, believers are warned to quench these fiery darts that the devil hurls into the souls of men. Point 2, every man is haunted with special temptations from temper, sex, age, custom, calling, company, over the course of his life, I'm sure. Course of affairs. These things are often spoken of in Scripture. From temper, God makes use of temper. For though he plants all grace in the hearts of the regenerate, yet there are certain graces wherein they are eminent, as Timothy for temperance, Moses for meekness, etc. Thus Paul speaks of the law in his members. Romans 7:23. The devil may find forces from the temper of the body to destroy the soul. So also from sex, as he beguiled Eve, 2 Corinthians 11:3, and from age, we read of youthful lusts, quote 2 Timothy 2:22, and how strong the devil is about young ones. 1 John 2:13, I have written to you, young men, because ye have overcome the wicked one. They are most assaulted with pride, with youthful lust suitable to their age. So from custom and education, Psalm 18:23, I kept myself from mine iniquity. Every man hath his iniquity, that is, such as his education and custom hath wrought upon him, which makes the sin prevail over other sins. A child of God hath a predominant sin, not over grace, for that is inconsistent with sincerity, but some master sin, which prevails over the rest. According as the channel is cut, so corrupt nature runs. But some in this channel and some in that. Every man hath his special sin, and accordingly the devil plies him. Then our calling is a special temptation. 1 Timothy 3:6, the apostle speaks that a bishop should, quote, not be a novice, lest being lifted up with pride he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Pride and ostentation of gifts and vainglory in such public service, other sins follow every calling. Therefore, if you would be skilled in Satan's enterprises, you must mind temper, age, calling. So company, as a man's company is, his soul is insensibly tainted. As a man that walks in the sun is tanned before he is aware, so are the souls of men sullied and defiled by carnal company before they be aware. A man would think of all sins, passion is so uncomely that it should not tempt another man. It is said, Proverbs 22:24 through 25, make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul. For the more accustomed to them, the less odious they seem. So by little and little our spirits are shaped and fitted for such a sin. There are certain sins that are more special temptations. Look, as every disease hath a diet which suits with it, so all sins in the soul. Satan knows what baits we will catch at. It may be a man that is addicted to the pleasures of the flesh may despise profit, and therefore the devil will not ply him that way. So a man that is addicted to gain despiseth pleasure. The devil suits him with a bait that suits the disease of his soul. It is an opinion the devils have their several wards and quarters, some for such a sort of sinners, others for another sort. Look, the heathens had several gods, which were indeed devils, as Bacchus, the god of riot or patron of good fellowship, of wantonness and love, and Mars, the devil of revengeful and angry spirits, and we read capital M for wealth, Matthew 6:24. I know it is a fictio to make the matter more sensible. There is a person feigned, but there may be something of this truth in it, that the devils have several quarters, some to humor the covetous, others enticing the wanton, others lie ligers in taverns and drinking houses to draw men to beastly excess, and others about the revengeful to awaken their rage. But all this, however it be, it is the opinion of some, in parentheses, should make us watchful over our own desires and inclinations, for that is it the devil makes use of to set upon us. Point 3, the sin of the devil tempting must be distinguished from our sin in consenting. If the devil tempt and we consent not, it is his sin. The envious man may throw weeds over the garden wall, but if we do not suffer them to root there, it is not the gardener's fault, but the fault of the envious man. So the devil may fling in temptations, fiery darts, atheistical or blasphemous thoughts. Yet if we throw them out with indignation and give no harbor and entertainment to them, there it is our misery, but the devil's sin. And therefore, if our hearts abhor them at the very first rising, though they be man's cross, they will be put upon Satan's account. Point 4, Satan, if he cannot prevail by the first temptation to draw us to sin, he will seek to prevail by a second or subsequent temptation to draw us to trouble and discomfort. If he cannot weaken grace, he may molest and disturb our comfort by flinging in a blasphemous thought, which is abhorred by a Christian. If he cannot draw you to deny God, then he will seek to cloud things that you may suspect your own estate. And thus our way is made wearisome to us. Look as a candle which sticks to a stone wall, though it cannot burn the wall, yet it smutcheth and defileth it. So the children of God, when the devil seeks to make their temptation stick, though he doth not burn their hearts with these fiery darts of blasphemy and atheism, they catch not there, yet they weaken our comfort. And then his second temptation is to bring us to doubt of God's love, to doubt of our own faith, and to draw us to impatience and murmuring at God's hand. Therefore, it should be our care not only to withstand the devil's first temptation, but his second also. Point 5, certainly they cannot stand long that seem to give up themselves to Satan's snares. How may this be done? Any carnal affection unmodified layeth us open to the devil. Timothy 6:9, they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. If a man cherish his worldliness and do not mortify it, he lieth ready to be seized upon as a ready prey for Satan. Judas, he had the bag, and he lay open to the devil. His worldliness increased upon him, so the devil entereth into him. Again, when we ride into the devil's quarters and will parley with temptation, when we freely open the windows of the senses unto alluring objects, and can dally with the snare and play about the temptation, then we do but tempt God to leave us and tempt the devil to surprise us. And therefore be sober, be watchful, for your adversary, the devil, walketh about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober. What is sobriety? A holy moderation in the use of worldly things. Be sure not to leave any carnal affection unmortified. And then be watchful. Take heed not to play about the temptation, nor put yourselves upon occasion of sin, for then we lie open to the devil and give him an advantage against us. Thus much for the second sort of temptations, such as come from Satan. The third set of temptations are those which arise from our own hearts. So we call these urgings and solicitations to sin, which we feel in our bosoms. Concerning this, also I shall give some observations. Point 1. If there were no devil to tempt us, yet the heart of man is fruitful enough of all that is evil. Matthew 15:19, out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witnesses, blasphemies. There is a black catalog, and all comes out of the heart of man. And among the rest, observe, there is murder, which strikes at the life of man, and blasphemy, which strikes at the honor and being of God. Though the devil should stand by and say nothing to us, we have enough within us to put us upon all kind of evil. Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful above all things, and desperately wicked, who can know it? As to actual sins, there is a difference, but as to original sin, it is the same in all. All the sins that ever have been or shall be committed in the world, they are virtually in our natures. They are but original sin acted and drawn out this way and that way, as all numbers are but one multiplied. Cain's murder, Judas's treason, Julian's apostasy and enmity to Christ, the seed and root of all is in our nature. And if we were but left to ourselves and had the same temptations and occasions, we should be as bad as others. Such as we would not imagine that ever we should commit is in our heart. 2 Kings 8:13, is thy servant a dog that he should do this great thing? When he had been told of those horrid cruelties, he should act upon the women and children of Israel. No man knows the depth of his own wickedness, if loosened of his chain and the restraints are taken off. At first nature abhors them and conceit of them. When God permits us to lie under the temptation and fair occasion, man is not to be trusted. We see in this respect what need to pray that God would not leave us under the power of temptation, because the heart of man is prone, naturally inclinable to all evil. There are new actual sins, but there is no new original sin. That is but one and the same in all persons and at all times. The root of all the mischief which hath been in the world is within us. Point 2, that without the flesh, the world and the devil can have no power over us. A man cannot be compelled to sin against his own consent. He may be compelled to suffer temptation, but he is a sinner by his own choice. The world would not hurt us were it not for lust in the heart. 2 Peter 1:4, escaping the corruption of the world through lust. I say, it is not the beauty or sweetness of the creature, but lust, which is our ruin and undoing, and that makes the world so dangerous unto us. A spider sucketh poison from the same flower from which a bee would suck honey. The fault is not in the flower, but in the spider. The devil can do nothing unless we give him leave. The fire is kindled in our own bosoms. Satan only doth blow it up into a flame. Naziasm. We have the coals in our own hearts. The devil doth but come and blow them up. Suggestion doth nothing without consent. In vain doth one knock at the door, and none within to look out and make answer. So all other temptations would be in vain if there were not somewhat within that would close with what is suggested from Satan. James 1:14, every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed by his own concupiscence. If your hearts did not yield, if you did resist, the devil in the world could force you. When Satan came to Christ, he might molest him, but he found, quote, found nothing in him, John 14:30. As a glass of pure water may be shaken, but there is no filth, no mud there discovered. But now, the best of men, they have somewhat within them, naughtiness and corruption enough in their own hearts, upon which Satan may work and inflame them with his fiery darts. In short, we may commit sin without Satan, but Satan cannot betray us to sin without ourselves, cannot have his desire upon us without us. Point 3, the flesh doth not only make us flexible and yielding to temptations, but is active in stirring in our hearts to force and impel us thereunto. There is a law in our members, Romans 7:23, a powerful active principle within us that is always urging us to sin. We think and speak too gently of our own corrupt hearts when we think the corruption is sleepy and works not until it be irritated by outward objects and Satan's suggestions. No, there is an active, stirring principle within us that poureth out sin as a fountain doth waters, though nobody comes to drink of them, as Genesis 6:5, every imagination of the thoughts of his heart is only evil continually. There is a mint in man's heart that is always at work, coining evil thoughts, evil desires, evil motions, and the flesh lusteth against the spirit, Galatians 5:17, and sin wrought in me all manner of concupiscence, Romans 7:8. Though there were no other occasion to irritate but God's law and the motions of his Spirit, yet there is continual fermentation wrought by these corrupt humors in our hearts. Natural concupiscence doth not lie idle in them, but is active and warring. And the objects that are in the world and the solicitations of the devil make it more violent. Point 4, the temptations of the flesh and the world go in conjunction and do mutually help one another. And therefore it is said, 1 John 2:16, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, etc. Mark, whatever is in the world, he doth not mention the object, but the lusts, because these are complicated and folded up together in the temptation. The bait is the world, but the appetite and desire we have from the flesh. And this is intimated in that passage, James 1:14, every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. There are two words there, drawn away and enticed. I guess it means two suggestions. The drawing away notes the vehemency of desire or inclination of our own hearts, and the enticement that is from the object. Both ways doth corruption work, by force and flattery. The great bait is pleasure, the contentment we take in outward enjoyments, and we are carried out to it by the vehement propension of corrupt nature. Point 5, this vehement propension of corrupt nature to outward things is set at work by a hope of gaining them or a fear to lose them. And so we are assaulted on every hand. Right hand, left hand temptations. The right hand temptations from the flatteries and comforts of the world, which are the more dangerous because of their easy insinuation into and strong operation upon our hearts. And so our comforts prove a snare to us and an occasion to the flesh, quote, as the apostle saith, Galatians 5:13. And then there are left-hand temptations, which arise from shame or fear of worldly evils, as the other did arise from a desire or hope of good. So the apostle, Galatians 6:12, as many as desire to make a fair show in the flesh, they constrain you to be circumcised, only lest they should suffer persecution for the cross of Christ. That was their temporizing then to comply with the Jews, who had some national privileges under the Roman government and had better security to their interests than possibly thorough Christians could have. Now, to avoid both these, the apostle, when he presseth Christians to all those graces which are necessary, he presseth them to temperance and patience. 2 Peter 1:5 and 6, add to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience. Both these are armor of proof against worldly temptations. Temperance against the delights, and patience against the evils and troubles of the world. It was never yet so well with the world, but that Christians, and this in parentheses, those that are so in good earnest, that mean to go to heaven and keep a good conscience, will be assaulted on both sides. Point 6, that there is no avoiding either of these snares and temptations as long as any carnal affection remaineth unmortified. For until a man be dead to worldly comforts and hardened against worldly sorrows, he doth lie naked and open to Satan. 1 Timothy 6:9, he that will be rich falls into temptation and a snare. And what is said of riches, the same is true of pleasure. He that is vehemently addicted that way will soon come to put God out of the throne and make his belly and his pleasure his God. 2 Timothy 3:4, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. Any lust that is cherished and indulged will betray us. As for honor, John 5:44, how can ye believe, which receive honor one of another, and seek not the honor that cometh from God only? True faith cannot be planted in that heart that is not purified, until there be a prevailing interest established for Christ over all carnal affections. Grace bears no sway in us and hath no power over us. The ambition and love of respect from men will necessarily make us unsound in the profession of godliness. Well then, it stands us upon to allow and cherish no secret sin, but to observe what are the tender parts of our hearts, or which way our corruptions lie, where subjection to God is most apt to stick with us. Psalm 119, 133. Order my steps in thy word, and let not any iniquity have dominion over me. Though we seem to have a zeal in other things, yet if one lust be indulged, we shall soon swerve from our duty. True obedience to God is inconsistent with the dominion of any one lust or corrupt affection. I say, though a man out of some slender and insufficient touch of religion upon his heart may go right for a while and do many things gladly, yet that corruption which is indulged and under the power of which a man lieth will at length draw him off from God, and therefore no one sin should have dominion over us. When doth sin reign or have dominion over us? When we do not endeavor to mortify it and cut off the provisions that may feed that lust. Chrysostom's observation is, the apostle doth not say, let it not tyrannize over you, but let it not reign over you. That is, when you start to have a quiet reign in your hearts. And the last, point 7 for today. The more we sin upon the mere impulsion of the flesh and without an external temptation, the more heinous is our offense. I'll read that again. The more we sin upon the mere impulsion of the flesh and without an external temptation, we're in a more heinous zone. The heart is carried of its own accord to sin. Ezekiel 16:33 and 34. They give gifts to all whores, but thou givest thy gifts to all thy lovers, and hirest them, that they may come unto thee for thy whoredoms. And the contrary is in thee from other women in thy whoredoms, whereas none followeth thee to commit whoredoms. And in that thou givest a reward, and no reward is given unto thee, therefore thou art contrary. These are expressions to set forth their idolatry, but that which is intended there is this, that they were not desired or solicited, but merely carried to sin by their own proper motion, which exceedingly aggravateth sin. Why? For then it is a sign the heart is carried of its own accord by its own weight, as a heavy body is moved downward, not by the impression of outward force, but by its own natural propension. We'll stop there today, and next time he will continue along on this same vein, but it's 3 instances of when men thus merely sin upon the impulsions of their own flesh. Thank you for joining us, and God bless you, and go in God's mercies and truth.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Peck. Thank the Lord. Lord willing, we'll talk to you again soon.